Hey everybody, welcome to the InEVitable podcast from MotorTrend. This is our attempt to discuss the inevitable future that is all coming, whether we like it or not. Electrification, electrified vehicles, plug-in hybrids, pure battery electric vehicles. They're coming. Some are already here. We think everybody's going to be driving these things. So let's talk about it. I'm here joined, as always, by my fabulous co-host, Mr. Johnny Lieberman. Great show today. Great couple of guests that you know very well.
I'm very excited about this show because we have, well, Ben Schaffer from Unplugged Performance. They're essentially a Tesla tuning company. And my buddy, and a guy I worked with for over a decade.
Our buddy.
Yeah, yours buddy too. Randy Pobst, the great, legendary Randy Pobst.
The guy from Survivor?
No.
He gets that all the time.
That's a different guy. No.
Randy Pobst.
The pro driver. This is going to be good because not only are tuning Teslas, that's pretty interesting.
Yep.
Racing cars for a living, that's pretty interesting. But Randy and I are both going to drive Pikes Peak this year, 100th running of the race.
Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, big
right.
race up a giant mountain in Colorado.
Yep. And, it's good. I'm just excited. This is going to be a good one. But I think we should just get right to it because they have a lot to say.
Yes, we all have a lot to say. So let's do it. Let's keep it short and sweet and welcome our guests, Ben Schaffer from Unplugged Performance and pro race car driver, Randy Pobst.
All right, Ben, Randy, good to see you. Ben, you and I have some unfinished business. We've been trying to get together to have a drink since Pikes Peak last year.
Many drinks.
So I brought you a present.
Uh-oh.
So this is a $15 bottle of bourbon that you can just go ahead and drink straight out. You don't need a glass or anything like that. It's going to be better than 95% of those Scotch things you waste all your money on.
Oh, those are fighting words.
Well, most of the Scotch things you're going to drink were made in used barrel, literally the barrel that was distilled in,
Absolutely.
Aged in.
Yeah.
It goes to Scotland and then it gets recycled. But I think that was like $14.99, and they might have given me a little discount.
I'm outnumbered because I've had this talk with Randy, and Randy's a bourbon guy. But
Yeah.
I am team whiskeys here, so
right.
we're going to have a battle at some point and figure this out.
All right.
But
Now, they're probably going to have to
you.
cut this because they don't want to show liquor or something weird. But, autonomous cars,
It's
we don't
just
have to
water
drive.
and food coloring. There's
Right.
nothing in there.
Exactly.
I'm actually only a friend of a bourbon person.
So
I'm
Put it on the
once
ground
removed.
is what I'm saying. But we will have that drink. We will have that drink.
Thank you. Actually,
We will have that drink. We've been trying, though. It's been a year.
right.
No,
Invite
thank
me.
you.
Yeah,
we
of
got
course,
it. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Maybe after Pikes Peak.
Unplugged
Yeah.
open house.
Right. So
Unplugged performance open house. Yeah.
Ben Schaffer, Unplugged Performance. Welcome, Randy Pobst, racing driver extraordinaire, friend of our house, friend of the Unplugged Performance house. Welcome as well. Very excited to have you for another episode of The InEVitable. We're going to talk about EVs. We're going to talk about EV racing. We're going to talk about what you guys are doing with Teslas and other vehicles. But first, we're going to talk about you guys and get to know who you are. We know who Randy is, pretty much.
Yeah, but maybe people listening have no idea.
I know, but what I'm saying is
Yeah, start with Ben.
we'll start with
Yeah,
Ben.
yeah.
So, got my little dossier here.
Uh-oh.
Known Ben for a while. We've been in the same universe. We both started on the, what do you want to call it, sport compact tuner side, JDM, like basically lowered, mostly Japanese cars with cool parts on them. You got your start with a company called Bulletproof Automotive, roughly 2000.
Yeah.
And you were one of the leading JDM, Japanese domestic market parts importers. My understanding is, from reading a bunch of interviews, it was mostly started with like a passion for S2000s,
Yeah.
but then evolved into Nissan GTRs.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you have a particular fondness, I noted in a lot of pictures, for black Alcantara.
Alcantara is a sexy material. Yeah. Nice to the touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just start.
Well, I think we go. How do you go from GTRs, which are gas burners that make a ton of horsepower by burning more and more gasoline, to Unplugged Performance, your current business, which is EV based? So how'd that transition happen?
Yeah, I mean, I should start by saying that, like most car enthusiasts, you kind of just go wherever the excitement and passion is. And sometimes there's not an obvious chart or method from A to B. In our case, I always loved car tuning. And, as Ed said, I started around the same time I think you started your career in journalism with Japanese cars, because that was like an exciting and new thing that I discovered and wasn't really obvious at the time. And then maybe I take some pride in just finding something new and charting a new path. And I began in 2000. I was involved with the first Fast and the Furious movie, and it was before it was trendy. But it was just cool, and I feel like there was something there.
We should pause right there because I remember very well. I was sort of like on the outside looking into the JDM scene, but that first Fast and Furious movie, I was like, I can't believe they actually made something about this stuff I'm interested in. Like it's so obscure. It was right. It was, especially if you're in LA. It was like, this is our little secret. Now the whole world, maybe if anyone sees it, no one's going to see it. But if they did,
It was totally strange because the budget was small and no one expected anything. It wasn't even called The Fast and Furious. It was called Red Line. And it was just a super low budget film with a bunch of street racers. And I happened to end up being there.
And no-name actors.
To be honest, there were a lot of people who were really core to the industry that were like, "What is this?" And like side-eyeing, some of the cars, some of the graphics, some of the
downshifting in the quarter mile.
There's a scene where Paul Walker's, I think he's in the Eclipse in the Dodger Stadium, whatever parking lot.
Yeah.
He's like shifting 15 times
to
get to like 70 miles an hour. It's like, okay, you could do that, I guess. I don't know how that works.
To be fair, it wasn't clear how much of a authentic or bastardized version of the culture it was on set until you see afterwards how they approached it and edited it. But the bottom line, and this is the hard thing, is like as a purist, you want to distill your passion as accurately as possible, but Hollywood's just not going to do that. The average audience doesn't care at all about any of this stuff. They just want to be entertained. So I would say the first one was definitely the purest, at least from my experience being involved in it, because it really did have, people off the streets with their own cars, and it wasn't really as formulaic. Later on, they have so much data, they just figure out what the audience wants to see, and they build for that like a pop musician. But the first one, I think, had a bit of authenticity. And they had some silly things, too, that didn't make any sense, which they all do.
But, I remember I was living in Echo Park at the time, and it was filmed in Echo Park. I was like, oh, my God, this is hitting home.
It had a lot of, it sounds weird to say, but there were some very relatable, very authentic parts to the movie that I think the audience really appreciated. But this is not the Fast and the Furious.
So let me...
Wait a minute. I got to say, we have this connection. I worked on the second Fast and Furious.
That was the one I didn't touch.
Too Fast, Too Furious. I did driver training.
Okay.
Oh, nice. For who? For who were you?
The stars.
all of
Paul
them?
Walker,
That's
Tyrese
fun.
Gibson, Devin Aoki.
Wow.
I went to the
A Latin guy who didn't make it in the movie.
Where did you do that? Did you do that out here, West Coast?
Miami.
Yeah, that was all in Florida.
That was the Florida version.
No, I went to the taping. I have a crazy, ridiculous story. It's a totally inappropriate story, but I went to the actual taping.
I know that story. That's super
I met
inappropriate.
Tyrese. He serenaded me with his latest single. It was really weird. But again, different story for a different show. So okay.
So to answer the question of how we ended up here in short form. And the irony, by the way, is I wasn't even living in California, and we filmed Fast and the Furious, what's now a block away from our office. So life works out in mysterious ways. But what ended up happening was, we grew the business and got involved heavily in GTR culture and car tuning, and ended up buying an office next to Tesla, but not doing Tesla.
SpaceX, though, right?
Both. So design studios right there.
In Hawthorne.
Yeah, so we're next to the design studio of Tesla and SpaceX, and we were still doing GTR tuning primarily. But we ended up meeting our neighbors. They came by the office because we were, making a lot of noise up and down the street with our cars. And there was just a mutual affection, I'd say, in our conversations. And it got me thinking about, more about what they were doing. I was already a stockholder, thankfully, before that. But this was in 2013. They kind of gave me a little bit of encouragement to get a Tesla. And from there, it's weird. Now it's obvious. But in 2013, it wasn't obvious that this was a good platform from a driver's perspective. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was instantly obvious the second I drove the car, because it doesn't matter what era, you're looking at car culture or journalism, the goals were always the same. Everyone was always trying to figure out how to make, torque at a lower RPM, or how to shift faster, or how to lower the center of gravity. And, I drove this car and I was like, okay, you can't shift faster than never. You can't have more torque than always. You can't have a lower center of gravity than this. Yeah, it's heavy, but the recipe was there, where it seemed like you could debate, naturally aspirated, supercharged, turbocharged, rear engine, mid-engine. But at a certain point, when you're talking about 50-50 weight distribution and all of this, rapid response time of the car, it just seemed like a platform that was, as you described, inevitable. It was inevitable right away that this was going to happen. And the question was, are car enthusiasts invited for the ride? Like, was it going to be something you could tune and enjoy and have this culture that I was a part of?
We're going to talk a lot about that, because I see where you're going, and I get it. EVs have batteries. Typically, the current design has batteries in the floor, right? They have one speed, effectively, like no transmission, so there's no loss in shifting in terms of acceleration. What else did you say?
And by the way, GTRs are heavy, so
Right.
so there's a common argument on both. I mean, for
But
me,
GTRs are tunable. That's the thing that I was trying
this
to
was
get
the
at,
challenge.
which is,
Yeah. So
like,
how can you tune an EV is one of the questions we had to answer. And when we started, it was worse than that because we started in 2013 where there were no tuning parts, there was no aftermarket, there was no motorsports culture, and everyone said EVs are the devil. It's like the worst thing you could do is drive an EV if you're a car enthusiast because it's anti everything.
But real quick, just so people know the weight issue. So like an R35 GTR is about 3,900 pounds from the factory, and a Tesla Model 3 dual motor is about 3,900 pounds. So
they're surprisingly similar.
Yeah.
And
So
the kind of buying
weight-wise-
behavior of an R35 owner I found to be similar to the buying behavior of a Model S or Model 3 owner.
The
If you
S
think
is
of-
much heavier, obviously.
But if you think about like when R35 came out, everyone's like, "Oh, Polyphony Digital, Gran Turismo guys made this touchscreen and all this stuff." The
Right,
Tesla's
right.
got a bigger touchscreen,
Right.
And the GTR is so efficient at putting power down. The Tesla's even better at putting power down. There's certain things that were parallels. If you talk about like a pure car, you have to almost look at like a Miata or an S2000. But if you talk about a fast car, the recipe was very similar.
Right.
So
right.
okay, so that's
Interesting.
2013, which will go down in history as I think a landmark year. That is the year that MotorTrend gave Tesla Model S Car of the Year. We celebrated that. We did that in the summer and fall of 2012. We did the program. We made the announcement in like November, but that year was the year that I think as we've talked about this a little bit. Elon and his team, actually his marketing guy at the time, told us a year later after we gave him Car of the Year, so you guys were like the hockey stick. Prior to MotorTrend giving us Car of the Year, nobody believed in us, especially the business, but Wall Street Journal, the business
we
publications.
still didn't believe in the business case when we gave him the award. Just
True.
let the record show.
But we were like,
Yeah.
this thing's legit. Like
Yeah, yeah.
this car, this electric car, holy moly! And it's great in hindsight that we were proven right. It's also been wild to see how much Tesla has done with fundamentally the same platform. That's one of these ongoing themes. But 2013 is a seminal year for you guys launching Unplugged Performance, which was dedicated, at least initially, to Tesla tuning.
Still is.
When did you start talking to this guy?
Oh boy.
This guy being Randy.
Randy Pobst.
What year did we start our kind of collaborations? It was at Tesla Corsa, one of our. So we began Tesla Corsa to create a track day culture for Tesla owners because the problem was nothing existed. There was no tuning parts, so we had to build that. There was no track culture, so we had to build that. We had to bring cars to SEMA, which no one had done with Teslas. It was just rebuilding what I learned how JDM tuning was built all over again for EVs.
And also, Randy raced a Nissan GTR at Pikes Peak.
Exactly. There's a parallel.
So-
Well, Randy's raced every car. There's not a car
Yeah,
Randy hasn't
that's
raced.
true.
So that's kind of an easy one.
We'll get there.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I've always admired Randy as everyone should. I recommend.
Well, let's talk about that. Why did you could have picked? There's no offense. There's lots of race car drivers out there, but and I'm fishing here. Was it perhaps the coverage that MotorTrend has done on like best driver's car at tracks like Laguna Seca, where we hand the keys to a whole bunch of brand new cars to this guy over here, who doesn't get any prep. He might take it out a little bit, but then he
Just to
goes
heat the tires.
Then he goes and sets the fastest lap. Did that have anything to play with it, or you knew him from somewhere else?
Oh man, everyone knows Randy from different places, but MotorTrend definitely helped a lot for I think his reach.
Okay.
But back when I was in college in the late '90s, I used to tear out ads and like cool things from Sport Compact Car and stuff you were involved in back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I think there was you were racing like a Honda Accord touring car or something.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had that on my wall back when I was in college even.
Oh, that's incredible.
And
The New Speed Honda.
Yeah,
In
the
the
New
North
Speed
American
Honda.
Touring
Yeah.
Car Championship. We won the championship in '96.
yeah, so I mean everyone knows Randy from something, but he's been around the block and driven everything, and half the lap records out there are this guy. So I
The
have
thing-
tremendous respect.
The thing I tell people, and we're going to go to Randy here just to talk a little bit about his background, but what I tell most of the PRs when we talk about getting fast cars and doing our track evaluations is that the beautiful thing about Randy Pobst is not only that he's fast, but he's fast to the fast. He's fast to being fast. When we go out to like Laguna Seca and we have to go through like 12 cars in a day or two, we can't have a guy messing about. We can't have a guy who needs like 15 laps to get the best one, because that eats up gas, that kills brake pads, that kills tires. When we were doing Best Driver's Car, Randy would turn in the fastest lap. He'd go out one to warm up the tires, and it's typically that second lap, meaning his first flyer.
or second.
The first flyer would be the one that, book it, guys, that's the one. Maybe he'd have a bobble, he'd try in the third lap. But really, by the fourth one, he's come in and said, that's it. And then we just go to the rest of our shooting. So being fast is one thing. Being fast to the fast is a completely different thing that really helps out.
I mean, one of my favorites, I don't even know if you know this story, but Jethro was doing an ignition with the Civic Type R. And because Honda and Indy and blah, 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 they brought in Scott Dixon. And so Randy was 2 seconds a lap faster than Scott was. And the decision was like, just cut Randy out of the video. Because Scott was like, well, if you gave me a few hours, like, I don't know this track at all. If you gave me a few hours, I could beat him, but not right now.
Again,
and,
secret sauce for this guy.
Hey, come on. I was like, that's pretty good.
Not just a race car driver, because there are a lot of fast, but a guy who can drive a production car fast.
That's
different skills.
And for those listening, if you don't know Scott Dixon, he keeps winning that Indy 500 thing.
Sure.
Should have won this year.
Should have won this year. Hell yeah.
Okay, so let's focus on Randy for a little bit, because we've just been bragging about you. How many? You've driven a lot of cars. You've raced for a lot of different teams, different brands. So we can cover that another day. EVs. How many EVs do you think you've driven in your lifetime? What was the first one?
Wow, not many.
Right.
Frankly, the first time that I touched an EV was MotorTrend.
Yes.
When Cam Reynolds drove up in one, the former tech director.
Right.
And I sat in it and looked at it, and just like you just said, Ed, I was impressed. I thought, this thing is legit. This is a real car. Mm-hmm. Before that time, I had not driven an electric car, but they were always weird. I don't know. It's like the designer's like, okay, this is electric. Make it weird. Right. The early Prius was so ugly and square. And then the second one was strange, a hybrid, but still very electric. And so I was very struck by that. But gosh, the first time I actually drove an electric may have been when I came out with you, Ben, and we did Tesla Corsa.
No, I think you did some
or was
Streets
it
of
in
Willow
our
stuff
testing?
with the Model 3 with Tesla.
MotorTrend testing,
yes,
maybe.
I think through us, didn't you also help Tesla set up one of their cars?
I did, because it was so horrible.
Right.
They almost killed me. We did a test day with the Tesla, and we had a Jaguar, I think it's called an E-Pace.
Yep.
Is that
I-Pace.
I-Pace, thank you. And I'm trying to hot lap these at Streets of Willow. And the Tesla fought me every step of the way. I did not have much control over it. I blame safety systems.
Sure.
And the brakes were not very smart. The anti-lock brakes, and that's what got me in trouble. One of the ways I beat Scott Dixon by a lot, I'm proud of that, was that at Streets of Willow, coming back, you get a long straightaway where you're over 100 miles an hour, and it goes over a crest, and it's been recently repaved. But before that, it was very rough. Mm-hmm. And it was what we all say now, full send. Come over the top of that hill hard and just bang across the tops of the waves in the pavement. And the brakes in the Tesla hated it. And I got that situation that ABS did more in the old days, but still some cars do it, where you have a hard pedal, no brakes. Several of the worst crashes in my racing career probably 800 races, were hard pedal, no brakes, ABS that was not happy on a racetrack.
Right.
Sent me right through the desert. Straight off. If there'd been a wall or anything, fortunately, Streets of Willow has almost no walls.
Right.
Then in the Jaguar, I'm trying to set a lap time in that thing too. And that was more of a safety system issue. I don't think it was electric related. But I noticed that the electric cars tend to have more invasive safety systems, a few years ago anyway.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm tracking out of a corner, everything's fine, full throttle, and the thing slams on the brakes and sent me out through the desert.
Right.
And I came in and slammed the door, and I think, Johnny, you were standing there. And I said, I am not driving these on track anymore. Forget it. we're going to die or we're going to crash a car.
But as your unofficial biographer, I should tell you that I know for a fact that was about 2017. In would have been July of 14 is when we had our Model S long-termer after it won. And Kim would always bring it up to Laguna Seca.
Yeah.
And we would always try and do one lap. And remember, it could
Yes.
never. So you
It
always
couldn't-
tried to do a
We
lap.
did crazy stuff like we bought a whole bunch of bags
26
of
bags of ice.
and put it under
Packed
the
it under-
car.
By the
to
way,
keep-
one thing which is really important to Randy's story was that was, I believe, the precursor and origins to track mode
yes.
for Tesla.
Oh yeah.
And that
It
car
was.
didn't have track
Yes.
mode, but his feedback to Tesla, I don't want to tell the story, you can, but this was a key point of that experience, I believe, was that after that, track mode was developed and a lot of these problems were resolved from the feedback that Randy
In
gave.
fact,
Well, I
merely-
couldn't get there. I got interrupted by Johnny.
Right. Well, merely talking about it, we're probably violating some NDA you signed.
Ooh. Yes.
That's okay. They have no communication department. They're not going to listen.
We're watching this. Right.
Edit.
Right.
And where were we? Oh, yeah, I had forgotten about that we tried to hot lap the Model S
Yes.
Yeah.
years before,
Yes.
and it would not do 3 corners
Yeah.
before it would shut down. Not shut down,
it would
but
just go
slow
into, like,
down.
Not safety. It was overheating the battery.
Yeah.
It was cooling.
It couldn't cool the battery fast
Oh,
enough.
you know,
Yeah.
I thought it was somebody in Tesla's iCloud up there noticing the car was at the track
That's
and
possible
saying,
too. Though.
They could
no,
do that.
you're not going to track
I
it.
mean,
Because
do
it
you
was
remember when?
shut off.
Do you remember on our? I think it was our very first range test. It was like
I know this,
Kim and
yeah.
Benson tried to go from like our office to San Diego and back, and they were like 4 miles from the office, and it was showing like 3 miles of range left, and they were talking amongst themselves like, "We got to give up." And suddenly the car like sends them an SMS message like, "No, you'll make it." It's like they're fully listening. It was Elon's car actually.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very strange.
Wow.
It was
I've
very
had
strange.
similar experiences, but let's
Precursor to AI.
Right.
But that was manual back then.
That was
Yeah.
So you guys have got together around Tesla Corsa, which we should explain. Corsa means race in Italian. It's about
Wait, let me.
racing. Oh, sorry.
Ed, if I may,
Go.
let's finish the next step
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that. Was that I was disgusted with the car as a track car.
Sure.
And I always say this: these are not track cars. Even the best supercars are not race cars. They're meant for street cars. Well, a little bit later, I get a call from somebody at Tesla, Lars. He was the
He's still around.
chassis development.
He's one of the head
department.
engineers. I believe the VP of engineering of Tesla, Lars.
At the time,
Very
I thought.
talented guy.
Yeah, I loved him. I thought it was kind of cool because he was the department. It was like one guy, and there was a young engineer working with him, and they invited me to come work on track mode. This is the first I ever heard of it. And so we showed up, and I think there was a MotorTrend presence, and they had already done a lot of work. By the time I got in the car on track mode day, it was way better. Right. But it was so cool because the young engineer sitting next to me with a laptop, and I said, are you going to be able to hold that? He goes, oh, yeah, I got this. And it was just like a scene from the Fast and the Furious.
Like tuning it.
Yeah, where they're tuning while they're driving.
Right.
We were doing that.
Right.
And specifically, he was adjusting the front-rear bias of the regen, the deceleration part, because that has a big effect on a car's behavior entering a corner, how much braking force there is front and rear. In this case, decelerating with the electric engines generating power. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
So we'd come out of a corner and I'd go, oh, it's pushing, it won't turn. We need to go back. And he'd be click, 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 just like in Fast and Furious.
Well, what you're talking about is it's really front of mind for me. We're working on a big project on what's called software-defined vehicles, and Tesla is the exemplar. And it sounds like movie magic, and I think any kids that listening, it sounds easy. Like, of course you can do that, right?
Yeah.
Tesla right now is about the only one where you have that direct line where you can do that because they built their own proprietary system. They have their own code. All the controllers talk to each other. It's their own architecture. A bunch of manufacturers, newer EV manufacturers are getting there.
I was going to say Rivian does the same thing.
Rivian does the same thing, but it is unique. Tesla is still one of the. There's a handful of others that maybe where it's entirely. They don't use any suppliers. Like it's their own source code. They designed it, and they didn't really do that with this intent. They kind of stumbled upon it. It was arguably the easier thing to do. Versus it was less expensive too for them, 50 guys at Tesla to do all the software. Now it's fascinating that the rest of the car manufacturers are struggling to create software-defined vehicles with the existing architectures that they have.
They're
which
even
is
doing
like-
it with audio, by the way, which is crazy. They're doing it. They're vertically integrated across every category of the car, and they can adjust everything via firmware because they just have such control over it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny because software started in the infotainment system, and before it was nobody. It was just like, oh, this is a way to charge more money for the car. Let's give them a premium audio.
Right, and Microsoft would build it for us, or whoever.
Right,
would
and they're
build
like
it
just
for
like,
us.
this stuff's not important. And now it's like this is the most
This is
critical thing
everything, yeah.
within the vehicle. So which does inform the rest of this conversation about how do you tune?
But real quick, just to burnish Randy's credits a bit more. So you helped out with the track mode. I know, just top of my head, I know you helped out with that, the Lexus, the big one, the LC.
LC 500.
You helped that. You helped out with the Viper.
Oh yeah, track
Yes.
TA.
Yeah, you
that's
helped out with the Viper, and also the
After we had a Twitter war,
Yes.
then they
Oh
hired.
no, you don't even know the war we had.
right.
Oh,
And then didn't you help out with the C6 or 7 Z06?
oh, a little bit.
A little bit.
I hate that car. It's terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't. The C7 wasn't good. The C6 was good. The C7 had problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but you helped out with that. But what other cars do you know that you've helped develop?
Can you talk
Well, no, but I can't talk about details. But you know
No,
what? I don't
just-
remember them
just-
anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, just the cars.
I
just the
drive
cars.
so many cars, and I love every minute of it. That was a pleasure about being with MotorTrend. I always drove all the greatest cars, flat out,
Right.
for a time. And I remember actually buying a 911 at one point, and I realized it was the first time I'd driven one on the street. This is a while ago, but a lot of cars are like that. I've only driven them on the racetrack.
Right.
You know, all the McLarens, all the Lamborghinis, and anyway, where was I going?
Oh, I was just asking if there's any other cars that you can talk about.
Like I say, I can't even remember them all now.
That's why
But
we're here.
I visited with Hyundai several times
Right.
on Veloster and their new N-line cars.
Oh,
and
really?
They just wanted feedback. And
Sure.
I swear there was a guy there that just wanted to see how fast I was.
Oh, yeah, I know that for sure because I talked to all kinds of OEMs where they're like, yeah, he's like plus or minus 5 seconds on Pobst. I'm like, huh? Like I'm like, let's get them together, bring them both out. Let's
well,
go.
you've done like some crazy. You did the Audi. You drove the Le Mans car.
I did
yeah.
for a story that was incredible, and the Porsche. I drove the prototype that won at Le Mans, the Audi R18.
Yeah.
You know, three lap sessions, but I was in it, driving it, and then the Porsche, the 919.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it was the car that won a Le Mans, but same
still.
kind.
But it's hilarious. The R18. Because I have spies everywhere. I knew a guy who was a photographer or a journalist on that trip, and he's like, yeah, man, when Randy went out, like, there's other journalists driving this car, and those guys are pretty fast.
No, this was BMW. You were driving a DTM car. I know this story well.
And they're like,
and it was all the pro drivers had their back to the track. Why would they watch journalists? And then you come in and like they heard where you were braking, and they both of the Germans turned around like, "Whoa, who's that guy? He knows how to drive. This is a problem, you know."
That was a great. I gotta jump in.
Yeah.
I was there to drive the DTM car.
Yeah.
But it was the GT4 car,
Right.
which handled better and kind of suited what I was more used to. The DTM was super high downforce, and I wasn't used to that.
Right.
And they were smoking me in the fast kink on the back of a little track in the middle of Spain. But the GT4 car fit like a glove. And it was early in the morning, and the pro guys had already been out to like set a time, right? And the BMW guys, everybody was friendly and happy and, you know, get in the car, have some fun, you know, go do your thing, whatever. And I go out in this GT4 and I'm like, I like this car. I can drive this. And you're exactly right. The pro drivers heard it.
Yeah.
They heard it and they go, this car's going very quickly. And I literally like, I don't know, 2 seconds on the pro drivers.
Nice. Yeah.
But the sun was coming up. The track was
No,
warming.
it's still great though because they're just they're smoking their cigarettes or whatever.
Yeah, they're like, whatever, you
smoking
guys.
like this.
Yeah.
Who is this?
They're not quite French, but they could have.
Yeah. Then I get out of the car, and here come the BMW honchos. And they sit me down. They're like, Mr. Pobst, I don't do a good German accent. We are happy to have you drive the cars. But remember, this is just for testing and for whatever, promotion or whatever. And I'm going, wow, I must have gone pretty fast. I knew I went fast. I
Right,
felt
right,
it.
right.
And they didn't want me to wreck the DTM car. Was
Wow,
really
they wouldn't have cared because I'm sure plenty of journalists from other countries stuffed them like crazy.
probably it's in
So
the
I'm like,
budget.
but this is great. So Corsa, track mode engaged. This is why you worked with Randy. But before that, Ben, you had to sort of figure out how are we getting Teslas, how are we getting EVs into a sort of a motorsport space. And so let me just go back further. Why? Like, were you getting strong signals from your customers that are like, man, I'd love to take my Model 3 out?
The opposite. I got a lot of hate.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No one besides our team really saw it, at least in the world that I was in. And I remember, launching it out of Bulletproof. In the beginning, it wasn't Unplugged. It was still our Japanese tuning company, Bulletproof. And we had grown, at the time, our Facebook audience to like 5 million fans. And we would start posting Tesla content. We got so much hate. And we brought it to SEMA, and we got so much hate at SEMA. And we got so much hate everywhere that we went.
SEMA is a hate generator.
But everywhere, it's like, what is this EV crap? What are you talking about? Go back to the things that we know and like.
Sure.
And it was just purely a conviction play. And it was a conviction play because I knew the platform was great. And more importantly, everyone gets into this hobby or life or whatever you want to call it from some influence. And I know for me, a lot of it was Japanese cartooning magazines and U.S. cartooning magazines. And I'm always trying to solve my own internal question of where's the excitement for the next stage of this. And I see Japanese cartooning culture, for example, where the demographic is aging and all the tuners in Japan are in their 40s and 50s now. And it's become super depressing because the life of Japanese cartooning is only export culture. It's not in Japan as far as the age goes. And I was looking at this and I'm like, man, I've been doing this now at that time 13 years. I want to keep doing this. What does the future hold for this? Right. And it was this crossroads of if everyone's right and I'm wrong and EVs just are crappy and you can't modify them and they're just only good for the environment but not good for car enthusiasts, then this industry kind of sucks and I'm not that excited about it. And it became really a question for me of can I create excitement for myself and feel motivated, because I already made the conclusion that EVs are going to take over and gasoline cars are going to fade out. I was already past that point mentally.
What year did you make that?
2013, within a day of driving a Model S.
Wow!
Instantly.
Wow.
So they encouraged me to check out the car. I bought a P85 Plus, and I think it was the next day we had a meeting in the office and said every dollar we make is going to go into creating an aftermarket and a culture for Teslas. And we launched Unplugged and basically had to create it from scratch because the only people doing anything were doing vinyl wraps and car stereos.
So
no one had made any parts for them.
Wait, describe that night. So you buy the car and you go the next day and you make that announcement. What were you thinking all night?
I mean, first of all, it was weird. I remember the regen is so startling the first time you drive a Tesla, and I was like, are the brake lights activating when I'm not on the brake pedal? What the hell is going on here? There was a lot of learning curve of just, fish out of water. And the next day, I'm like, this is too perfect. Our neighbors are doing the most exciting thing I've ever seen. This car is totally new, and we have to solve this. And I remember, it wasn't one night of thinking about how to approach it. It was the next year of well, crap, what do we do? At that point, I was so used to having an ecosystem of I knew who the best companies were for suspension and for brakes and for exhaust systems and all this different stuff. And we represented a lot of those brands as Bulletproof. And we were involved in some manufacturing, but I couldn't go to anyone and say, all right, I want the best suspension for a Tesla. No one did anything. Right. So we had to basically create every category of tuning from scratch. And we started by hiring a bunch of composites guys and started doing carbon work in-house. And then we started contracting out to different partners to develop suspension components and brake components.
Product?
It was a bunch of things all at once because we basically built the Model S that we had for SEMA and for an industry event called TMC Connect. This was, I think, end of 2013. The first investment was we hired a guy from Italy, from Ferrari F1. We hired a guy who was a Boeing engineer to build a composites team in-house. And simultaneously, while doing that, we basically built an aero kit because I feel like style is part of what sells a car. Of course, it has to go fast, but if it doesn't feel unique and attractive, no one really cares.
You need a wing.
So, yeah, it was pretty low key. It wasn't super over the top, but we built a lip kit, we call it, as far as aero, all out of carbon, in house. And then at the time, I didn't have the right manufacturing partners for wheels, so I got some ADV ones and just upsized it to 22-inch. It came standard with 21s. We made our own lowering brackets to lower the suspension, and then we What did we do? Shortly after we started getting into brakes and more suspension stuff. But in the beginning, it was basically what you'd expect for step one. Make the car look cool, low, big wheels, and just talk about, this can be a car you can enjoy that's not like every other. And Tesla, by the way, left this wide open back then and still to this day. Every other car manufacturer has like an AMG or an S or an M, and you can tell the cool car from the entry-level car. And I had just gone through the experience of buying a P85 Plus for 120 grand, and it looked the exact same. It had all the same parts as the same car that was like 60 grand.
P60.
Yeah, and I was like,
anymore.
like anyone.
They never actually sold. Right. Maybe one, yeah.
To anyone, this is kind of obvious. It's like, okay, I got a bigger battery and it has more acceleration, but it felt kind of weird when I was going to supercharge the car and every car was the same. And you could see like there was just the need for this car culture to exist. This was not motorsports culture yet. This was the precursor of just can you enjoy the car and customize it?
I was going to say, especially in the U.S. where we do not believe in stealth wealth. Like in Germany, you debadge your E63. Here you take your E450 and you put an E63 badge on it.
Right. Well, but you're also highlighting where the hate from the aftermarket came from, because it's a fundamental difference between Tesla's kind of a Silicon Valley tech company, and they're approaching like let's build an app like the Apple like experience for cars. The U.S. SEMA aftermarket crowd, they are like, let's put 22-inch wheels on it. Let's put a wing. Let's make it our own. And it's like, how do these
make it our own is the key word here, a key set of words. And make it our own is what either makes people passionate about cars or makes them not care. And I really don't want cars to become iPhones where all you're talking about is putting a case on it.
Right.
Like I want there to be an experience where you can personalize it.
Right.
I got to say something. I got tears in my eyes from you talking about your decision to go with the Tesla, the commitment, that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, I know this, I see it, I don't know what it is, I don't know what it's going to cost, I'm going to do this, boom.
Yeah.
That's just amazing to me.
That's why I was asking, like, what did you stay up all night, or was it just like, you know what, this makes a lot of sense, this is what we're doing?
No, I mean I contemplated a lot because it had ramifications. Like we made a choice not just to bet the business on it, but to stop taking paychecks for years and just to plow everything into R&D because we had no investors.
That's
we were
what
just
I'm
doing
talking
it
about.
ourselves.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it's like
that's what made America great, right there.
But you can look at it from two sides. You can look at it like, oh, this was like also positive. You can also look at it from like the toothache and the dentist standpoint of I was experiencing pain that I wanted to fix too. I was experiencing like pain of like, what did I do with my life? Like, where am I going? Like, there was like this existential threat that I needed to solve too. It wasn't all just like, roses. I was struggling with like motivation to continue the existing business because I already saw the future. And I was like, this sucks if I keep doing the same thing knowing that it's going to end.
But what's great about your story is that you were in a right place. You happened to just get the spot next to SpaceX Tesla.
Which is right next to where I filmed in the first Fast and the Furious, which is super weird.
Yeah,
but yes,
and then right time,
totally.
right when Tesla's launching. But you took advantage of it because lots of people are in the right place, right time, and do the wrong thing. Or listen to the people saying, look, here's the other thing too. I don't want to get too into this, but like you're saying, oh, people had a lot of hate for EVs. I remember because I was never really part of any one culture. Like people hated Japanese cars because they were Japanese. They weren't American.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I
People
dealt with
hated
that before,
BMWs
too.
because they're not Chevys, and people hate Chevys because they're not Porsches. And so this, I just like cars. I don't really care, but this whole industry is just filled with people hating things because they're different.
Right.
And that, by the way, is before I started with Unplugged, the thing that kept me motivated was that, and I still say this frequently because I believe in it, the best thing about the industry is that it breaks down barriers of politics and religion and everything else. And anywhere I travel in the world, I'm instantly brothers with whoever I meet with because we can talk about something, have a shared commonality, and all the rest of the stupid noise and division fades in the background. And that's super powerful. And I think
and that's
it's
most
one
of the
things
time
that I fight for.
That's most of the time though. I've had some experiences though where like
We still infight like crazy on cars because that's also fun. Like the debate is what's fun. Like the argument about what's the right platform or what's the best car. Like you have to have that if you have passion.
So but let's go back because you said under when you debut at SEMA under the Bulletproof under your JDM brand with Tesla, you get a lot of negativity.
Yeah.
How then do you? So when do you launch Unplugged, and when do you get a positive signal to expand and go into things like Corsa track days and involve Randy and then go to Pikes Peak? I do want to end up getting into like your racing.
Oh, absolutely.
And
We're right in the middle of it again, so we definitely want to talk about
yes,
that.
we are.
So when we first made the Model S, we were kind of like, half foot in, half foot out for branding. The car actually had bulletproof and unplugged branding on it, and it was really slow the first couple of years because we were just trying to figure out how to build the right suite of parts to make the car compelling to drive.
But also, Tesla wasn't selling that many cars a year.
It was a
yet.
small market.
Yeah.
We were losing a ton of money, and thankfully, Bulletproof and Japanese cartooning funded it. But we were tight, and it was really a couple years before we started to. I mean, from my side, it's one of these things, and maybe you guys get it. Like when you have conviction, like the market doesn't really matter that much. You obviously have to pay the bills, but I was confident. Like it didn't matter if we sold a lot or a little. I knew where it was going, and we just needed to stay alive to get there.
That's beautiful.
It's just like it was obvious, and I'm sure everyone's felt that way about something when you're like deep in it and you know it well. Like you don't have to get external validation. You just know this is the thing.
There's also, I've noticed this within the car industry, and not just Teslas, but where if no one's driven a Tesla, they're like, oh, it's just a golf cart. And it's like
that's the big disconnect. Once you drive it, opinions change rapidly.
And then, I get a lot of people like, aren't you depressed that like internal combustion's going away? And I'm like, oh, tell me, that you haven't driven a Rivian or a Lucid without telling me you haven't driven a Rivian or a Lucid. Like, I'm more excited about these cars than anything. Everything else is kind of derivative. Like, I know there's going to be a GT3 RS. I haven't driven it yet. I kind of know what they're going to do.
Right.
It's going to have a little bit more aero. It's going to have a little bit less glass. It's going to have a little bit more power, a little bit more wing. You know what I mean? But like, the Rivian like knocked me backwards. I bought one. I couldn't believe that, like 4 motors. Who knew? That's the secret to everything. You know what I mean? Like it's the coolest thing. And
until there's 7 motors.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
motors are always better.
Yes. No, but I'm just saying it's like I think what I'm trying to say is I get your confidence having you drove a Model S and you're like, yeah, obviously.
If you understand it well, you understand it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much once you experience it.
Right.
At least in my case and in your case.
And if you talk to a lot of Tesla owners, that they drive their buddies and they go out and buy one the next day because it's like, damn, that's a good car, especially for the money.
Right.
Yeah. So this is to answer Ed's question. This was the hurdle of there were multiple problems to solve. The first problem was there was no aftermarket, no ecosystem. You have to have that before you have Tesla Corsa. So for me, it was a series of solving problems.
What is Tesla Corsa?
So Tesla Corsa is basically a friendly version of any typical track day where you go out, spend a couple $100, bring your daily driver to the track and drive it. But the key point for Tesla Corsa is that I was trying to solve a belief factor that A, it wasn't promoted that you can actually drive a car on track, and there was a lot of confusion around that Teslas could be fun on the track. And B, there was a lot of apprehension, I think, for first-time people to go to the track and be amongst a bunch of aggressive drivers in their mind where they feel threatened. And what I wanted to do was to create a safe environment where it was only Tesla drivers. It was, we were already seeing Tesla owner meetups, so obviously people want to hang out and talk about cars no matter what culture it is. But the fear factor of taking your daily driver and going to the track is a hurdle that has to be overcome. So,
and real quick, I still experience that when I go to track days. It's like I always feel a little bit of intimidation. I usually do okay once I'm there.
I think it's inevitable that everyone feels it to some degree because everyone's
trailer.
Macho and they want to be the fastest.
Right. Very.
And I wanted to break that
X chromosome
barrier down.
Let's get what about some of the practical concerns? Charging, like where was the first Corsa? How many vehicles were there, and how many chargers did you have?
So we've done most of our Tesla Corsas at the same couple of tracks because of charging. So the challenge is not that how fast can you charge one car. The challenge is if you want to run a run group of 15 or 20 cars, how do you fast charge all of them at the same time?
Exactly.
That's the hurdle. So we were looking at kind of this Goldilocks situation of what tracks can we find that had a large Tesla supercharging network close enough by that you can have the drivers run to the supercharger after a session, charge in time, and get back, and have enough capacity at those chargers to do it. And the answer when we started Tesla Corsa in 2017 was Buttonwillow. Because Buttonwillow has 2 different Tesla superchargers, both within about 20 minutes, and enough capacity to support enough drivers for us.
And if I have my history right, that's where Randy met MotorTrend and vice versa, was at Buttonwillow. Mortara knew who you were. Scott Mortara, our former road test engineer, and you were out there the same day we were. And he was like, hey, you're Randy Pobst. And
2007, 6?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
5?
Before my time. Before my time.
Yeah.
But Tesla Corsa wouldn't have been exciting if we hadn't already built, coilovers and, a whole package of suspension, brakes, aero, and everything to make the car fun. So, looking back, we could have started Tesla Corsa earlier, but it wasn't compelling. We had to basically build the aftermarket parts first and then bring in someone like Randy who can give us validation on the parts, give us feedback, optimize, drive. And Randy was doing his first event doing driver coaching.
Well, let me let's talk about that. Let me put my skeptical hat on. I know what tires can do to just an average car. If you put a really sticky set of R comps or something, like you're going to dramatically improve
Absolutely.
everything, braking, handling, turn-in, right? What does a set of coilovers do for a Model 3? Like, is it shockingly different, and in what ways? And I'm going to talk to you.
You're asking me
Yeah.
that question
Yeah.
in front of Ben?
Yes. So forget he's here,
The Tesla Model 3 was pretty good stock,
right?
and it was way better than the Model S, especially its cooling. It could go longer. The Model S drivetrain would get hot so fast, and that's something about tracking electric cars that I first was exposed to at Pikes Peak. They had a couple of them catch fire. And I began to realize that when you're using a lot of electrical power, you're generating a lot of heat.
Not Teslas,
Just-
by the way.
Not Teslas, right?
But the air's thin, and if you're air cooling batteries and you have thin air, that's a bad combo.
Yes,
So liquid cooling helps out a lot. Yeah.
It's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is picture in your mind a short circuit. What happens when you short circuit and you run a lot of current? It's hot, and it runs current not only when you're going, feeding power to accelerate, but when you're regenerating, when you're slowing down. Right. So it's current, and we're still dealing with those questions in our race car. How much of this and that, and how do we keep it cool? And that's the single most important issue in tracking an electric car is managing the heat. So the Model 3 was much better at that than the Model S, and it was pretty good stock, pretty darn good. So if we think of other sporty cars that handle well, if you go to your coilovers and your suspension, a lot of it is the look. It's lower,
Right.
bigger wheels, flares, looks cool. On the street, you're not going for times anyway. Right. And the other thing is, it's not shocking. Because the Model 3 from Tesla was pretty good, the performance.
Right.
And I'm not as familiar with the non-performance versus performance because I think I've only driven performance
Right.
Model 3s or a lot of them with unplugged suspension. So it's kind of like we know from our regular cars. It's a clear step better, especially on track. And enthusiast-type drivers like a car to be a little firmer, respond a little more quickly, have a little more grip, and actually makes them safer on the street because they stop better and they avoid crashes better. But it's not shocking, but it's significant.
I'm going to ask you another awkward question in front of Ben. So, would you see more of a difference in your average Tesla Model 3 performance with a new set of sticky tires or a new set of coilovers or something else?
Testing is in order. But the single most important part of a car in terms of your lap times is the tires. So tires are a big step. They make everything better.
Right.
And it depends on how bad the original suspension is, too. Plus, I think part of what we're dealing with, Ben and guys, is that car enthusiasts like to modify.
Yeah.
They like to try to make it better, different, experiment. It's a way to enjoy the
May
car.
I jump in on this? Because I have a couple
Just
additive
real
points.
quick. Before you, I would just say though, if you put stickier tires on and you suddenly you're braking better because you have better grip. If you don't improve the brakes, then you're killing the brakes. Your tires might be better, but if your brakes can't handle it,
Tires are a force multiplier.
Yes.
It kind of
Johnny-
makes the suspension worse too.
Johnny's
Because now
heading the direction
softness-
here.
Yeah, the softness is exaggerated by the grip of the tires, and in a sense, it makes that worse.
So there's multiple answers to this topic. The first answer, surprisingly, recently, is that we're able to get a much more compliant ride, and a lot of our customers now are buying them to be more comfortable on the street. But the real question in terms of track is you have to look at a car as a cohesive system. We talked about vertical integration with Tesla and how they can update firmware and control things. Adding stickier tires, adding more grip, adding aero, doing anything to make the car faster, if you're on stock suspension and you don't have adjustable coilovers, is not going to work. All these things have to work together, and the coilovers are a precursor to anything else you do to make the car faster. So I think part of the question is not, A to B, stock car, everything equal, how much faster coilovers are, probably a second, not a lot. But if you want to make a car 5 seconds faster, you can't do it without coilovers. And I think that's really the key point is you need the fundamental tunability of the coilovers, the correct spring rate pairings, or the option to change spring rates based on what you're doing, the correct dampening, or the options that change the correct dampening. If you don't have that ability, you just don't go anywhere faster.
All right, now before we get to Pikes,
What a great answer.
but it's a great answer.
He's so smart. I just drive.
The $1 million question for unplugged performance. You're doing brakes and you're doing suspension and you're doing Can you make the cars more powerful, which is what tuning is kind of all about in some ways?
Yes and no.
Okay. Good answer.
No, it's a safe answer because I'm right either way. So.
Right, $500,000 answer. $500,000.
No, from our point of view, it's hard because we really want to fill a role that supports Tesla as authentically as we can. We're independent, but we're really looking at this like, what do Tesla owners, what do we think they need or want in solving for that? And I don't think Tesla owners need or want a car that's no longer a Tesla, divorcing the power component, the battery component, the cooling component, the supercharging network, the warranty, the firmware updates. And if you want to add power, you have to accept that all of those things have to change. And if you do that, you can Frankenstein the car. I mean, there's nothing.
Right. And some people will want to do that.
And it will happen. And maybe we'll do that, maybe not. But we're at a stage right now where, and Randy could talk a little bit about driving the Plaid, where I don't think power output is really a huge limiting factor. I might be much more interested if we could solve cooling it in a bit better of a way and having more control over that. Right. But the power output of Plaid is fantastic. So.
And I'm just to tie it to Pikes Peak, though. I know like both Reese Millen and Ken Block, they're showing up with 1,400 horsepower.
Oh, I'd love more power. No question.
Not 1,020, 1,400.
Yeah.
In lighter cars.
There's no question that physics will still prevail, and I don't expect to have a car that's faster than cars that have better power to weight and have better dynamics and better aero. We're still racing a mass-produced 4,000 plus pound car, a four-door car. This is not a race car we're racing. We just happen to make it really, really fast.
Right, and you're trying to run a business, and I suspect, and please correct me if I'm wrong, your customers probably don't want to drive an EV that has all of its warranties voided or cannot receive the latest firmware update because you got in under the hood or started messing with the code and started to do things that, quite honestly, you don't know what the end result's going to be.
We're definitely not afraid to do it, and we have done some really stupid things from a business standpoint just because it's fun. Like the car that we wrecked, the Model 3 at Pikes Peak, is now tube frame front end with the one-piece carbon cowl that we made, and it's a center seater like an F1 car. And it's just totally stupid, and we're never going to sell it. We're never going to make any more of them. It wasted a bunch of money, but we did it because it's awesome, and we do stuff that we like.
There's going to be a percentage of the population that sees that. They're like, yes, that's what I like. Because, how many people get a brand new Mustang and put a giant supercharger on it, void every conceivable warranty, and go drag race?
But we're dancing around a little bit of the anxiety around this shift to electrification.
Yeah.
It's for the industry. It's not just you got a motor and you got some batteries in your car. It's what you don't have, right? You don't have an engine. You don't have an engine that has valve springs or pistons or cams or any of this stuff. And then you think bigger picture. What does this mean for the auto industry? What does this mean for right to repair? What does this mean
I don't think so. I really believe that there's a strong ecosystem out there of companies like AEM and others that are building controllers. There's enough hot rod and retrofit stuff.
But
you can do that on any chassis.
Like an order of magnitude fewer parts in an EV of things that move.
Sure.
So I read a.
That's why the business plan works.
I misquote. Well, exactly. But this is
the cost of batteries down. Cheaper
this
to build.
Is the existential threat for all the legacy car manufacturers that are not a startup that are still building gas-powered vehicles. Which is, and I misquote this all the time, but I heard like Akio Toyoda said in a speech that 1 million jobs will be lost to electrification, and he's not like 1 million people losing jobs, which is a big number. He's like 1 million jobs, job titles, job positions go away. The guy who winds the valve springs, that job is gone.
Yeah.
The guy who builds the transmissions, gone because there's no transmissions.
That's a real issue.
Yeah. So this is where you get into this sort of gut wrenching, like, I get it.
But then you also get into like, if we get rid of the cotton gin, then this is
it depends on
industrial revolution. Yeah.
It really depends on what question and what lens you're looking at. If you're looking at, can you modify a car to be faster and more fun to drive and have freedom to modify? Yes. If you're saying, can you do that and support 100 companies, 100 part manufacturers? No, maybe you support 20, and a lot of jobs are lost. They're two different questions, two different answers.
Sure.
But I do believe that the origin question was, can you add power? Yeah, you can. We're not making those things because it is in some respects against the Tesla philosophy of the car, but companies will do it, and the market will grow for it, and there'll be a bigger ecosystem for it. But jobs are going to get lost through this, and that's before we even talk about autonomous cars, which is a whole different story.
Sure.
Then you're losing all your drivers out there. The job market is a massive topic in general, but in terms of car tuning, I think freedom and flexibility will continue to open up wider and wider.
Okay. Good. No, and let's very serious topic. Let's get back to the fun stuff.
Pikes Peak.
Pikes Peak. So yeah, this probably take us home because everybody at this table apparently is going racing in Pikes Peak except for me.
That's true.
Which is great. Good luck, guys. There's still blue sky corners out there. It's very dangerous. I have a kid at home, so do you. I don't know what you're doing. It's
It's gonna be
insane.
so much fun.
You are not racing an electric car.
No, I'm racing a Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 Club Sport, same one Tanner Faust drove last year.
Right. But you, sir, have now, this is, how many Pikes is this and how many Pikes in electric cars is this?
I think it's my 8th time racing at Pikes Peak, and it's the 3rd year with electric cars with unplugged performance, the Model 3 and then the Model S, these last two.
Wow, 8 times. That's getting up there. That's pretty
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
You ever, did you ever drive on it unpaved when it was?
I did. Back in 1995.
What's the difference?
As a raced up or just drove on it?
Oh, raced.
Oh, boy.
Oh, two
What's
things.
the
One, it's the
difference?
best thing I ever did in a car. Dirt is way better
Way
than
more fun,
pavement
right?
in
Yeah,
every
yeah,
way.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and then I did a, never mind. And then the other part, the dirt's better. And, I forgot where I was going with the second
Well, I
one.
was asking
Help me.
because I've asked, I've been hanging out with Zwart and Reese Millen and these, this is Reese's 26th year of running up the mountain. Wow. Yeah, it's incredible. But I ask all these people in Tanner and Ken Block, and I've asked them all this question, and they're like, well, yeah, dirt was more fun, but it's a lot faster now.
Well, is
a
dirt
lot faster.
safer?
Absolutely.
It's much safer, too, yeah.
You wouldn't think so, right?
You're not going
You
as
think,
fast.
Gosh, you're sliding around. You don't have any grip, but you're not going as fast. And if you make a mistake, there's just more time to deal with it. Whereas with pavement, you don't have the margins.
Especially on a blue sky. Blue sky corner. Blue
blue
sky
sky.
corner means no
1,800 feet straight
no
down.
no guardrail. And just so you know, remember our audience, Pikes Peak, 11,400.
No.
14,100.
14,115 is the peak, and it starts at like 9,800.
I remember one of the things when we were out there, and it was before the crash, someone, I don't know if it was you, but someone said if you go off here, and they were talking about where you went off at Devil's Playground, and you roll, you end up in a different zip code. Is that correct? I think that was true. You end up in Manitou Springs.
It's not Devil's Playground where I crashed the 3. It was
that's right.
Bottomless Pit.
Bottomless Pit, that's
and
right.
And they call it that for
Yeah.
a reason.
Bottomless Pit because of that.
Yeah, if you look at a mountain, what's its shape? It's like 45 degrees up to the peak, roughly, right? But there's always going to be these places that are straight down, and Bottomless Pit was one of those places.
Right.
And unfortunately, there was this big bump right there. And it's kind of a long story. You want to hear about how I wrecked the
it's
Model
the-
3?
Yeah.
It's the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb.
Yeah.
It's essentially a
Yes.
race. You start kind of at the bottom and you go up as fast as you can. It's like a week-long activity. There's practice sessions.
But it's 12 miles, 150 some odd corners.
And it's a public road.
Extreme environment for cars and for people.
Yeah.
But there's no cooling up there. So like the car I'm driving will be making half power by the time it gets to the top.
You're essentially going straight up. So as you go up,
actually it's weird. If you actually look at Pikes, you stay at about 10,000 feet for a lot of it, and then it starts really ramping up, and the last like 7 miles is like 5,000 feet of elevation.
right.
or
So
4,000
not only are you climbing, so you're fighting gravity. The air is thinner. So for normal internal combustion engines, thinner air, less oxygen,
But for EVs, less cooling.
and less cooling for EVs. Less cooling for everybody.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So you're fighting all of these. You're fighting physics going all the way up, and then of course there's multiple corners where there's no guardrail. They're called blue sky corners, so it's very dangerous.
But also plenty. I mean, Randy should be talking. He's driven it way more, but like plenty of corners with guardrails that are hella dangerous.
Right.
And you're
Right?
fighting nature,
Yeah.
which is super scary.
You have
Yeah.
one you
The
called.
weather.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but you did a thing where you talked one of your laps, and,
Yes.
and it was right after the little guardhouse thing,
Yes.
And you said like, that's a dirty right. It's like a second gear right. And like, man, that's a dirty right.
And for some reason, that corner is always dirty. There must be erosion across the road. But Ben just mentioned weather or nature. And the road, you never know what the weather's going to be. It can change 3 times in a run. You can go bright, sunny, and warm to rain to sleet and hail and ice on the same run.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And this is more, it seems to happen more in practice, actually, because you practice early in the morning because the highway is not actually a public highway. You have to pay to drive it.
Right.
And they don't want to lose the money. So they make us practice before they open.
Right. So they shut it down at 8. So
Yeah.
you're getting there. What time do you get there?
Yeah.
4 a.m.
4 a.m.
3 a.m.
Early.
At the bottom of the mountain to enter the track. Yeah. We get up at 2 a.m. And so the weather's a big issue. There's so many issues at Pikes Peak. We practice from 6 to 9 a.m. We race at more like noon.
Right.
And the weather's very different. Right. So you never get to practice in the same weather typically. Also, you don't get to practice a whole run. Ever.
Right.
It's
Ever.
always
Right.
You don't do it until the day of the race, and you only do it once.
So last year I was there with Bentley and Reese Millen. Day of race, it was like, we're leaving the hotel at like 6:02. And they're like, we get a video from the Bentley crew, and they're like, they're showing guys with like flamethrowers. They're trying to melt ice on top of the mountain. They're like, it's not working, so they're gonna shut down the top section. And then Reese's car it had this like GPS turbo. So basically, as the elevation increased, the turbos would spin faster to increase the pressure in the intake plenum. Last year, never happened before. For some reason, there was a weather event. Barometric pressure was way up. So as he's increasing the turbo pressure in the car, it blew the airbox apart. The intake plenum, the carbon fiber box, shattered because they were saying at 12,000 feet, it was the equivalent of 8,000 feet. Maybe just on his run, just never happened before or since. But like, because everyone I talk to says you're racing against a mountain. You're not racing against anybody else. The mountain is very unforgiving.
And speaking of last year, in the Unplugged Performance Model S Plaid, nicknamed Dark Helmet,
which was blasting the Spaceballs theme at the start line.
As you should.
Which is pretty good.
Randy finished first in his class, first in the exhibition class, 10th overall, with a time of 6 minutes, 57 seconds flat. That's really fast.
Well, it was. Remember, there was a shortened course. It was an 8-mile
Thanks,
course.
Johnny. Like, what? It's still very fast.
It's hey, 10th overall is insane.
10th overall in a modified street car.
Yeah,
Right.
It's insane.
If you put a handicap based on how much that weighed versus the competition, it'd be hilarious.
You're like 25
twice the
pounds.
weight of the other cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
25 pounds
And this
heavier.
is the same car that you guys had lapped previously at Laguna Seca that was faster than a 911 GT2 RS and only a few paces off a McLaren Senna. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now it's much faster this year.
And by the
we'll
way,
find out next week.
I was there at Laguna at Hypercar Invitational when you guys were lapping it, and you were not happy. You were like, needs more this, needs more that.
It was
brakes.
still early. We actually changed a lot between then and race day at Pikes
So
Peak.
actually talk about that
That's
because that was the big deal. It was Saturday when you guys showed up at Laguna Seca, and you said you put it on the truck at like 3 a.m. Friday night or something. Tell us this story.
Well, I don't want to give away the magic, so there's a lot of the story I can't say. But what I can say is that Tesla launched the Plaid very close to that timing, and we didn't have a whole lot of time.
I think they launched it Thursday.
Yeah, it was not easy. We showed up with the full prep race car that had never been driven.
Right.
So of course the car wasn't dialed in, and Randy had a lot of things he wanted to change because that was the first time anyone really had driven a Plaid, and we just took some educated guesses at what we thought would get us in the ballpark. And the timing between that and Pikes Peak was really only, I think, a couple weeks. So we made a lot of changes. It was, our whole team was on it, 24/7, like no sleep schedules for weeks.
I mean, I hung out with you guys for 2 days in the pits, just watching what you were trying to do with the brakes and rebuilding the whole thing overnight and everything at Laguna, not even at Pikes.
It was chaos.
Yeah,
it was definitely chaos. But when you have that kind of timetable, you just get it done, and we got it done. It wasn't always pretty, and I'm glad like some of the behind the scenes stuff wasn't put out there because it was a grind, but we got it done.
I think you told me a lot of it, and I didn't publish.
We got it done, and the key point is, with 2 weeks later, we put down a time at Pikes Peak that it wasn't that it was 10th overall or whatever. It just what you were racing against in our case, it was absurd. Like the fact that we were even in the running against these, purpose-built pure race cars with a car that, had a short amount of time being modified off of a street platform. I think that says a lot about the technology. It says a lot about how fast the car is, the platform Tesla has. And what's crazy is we're running the same car this year. We've changed a lot. And
how much percentage-wise would you say different from
Well, I wanted to ask you because I haven't asked you this question. So Randy just did a shakedown, and we changed a lot of things on the car. So it was nowhere near dialed in. The aero was still not right. The suspension was still not right. But based on what you drove, what do you think it would do at Laguna next week? Oh. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, my gosh. That's a tough one.
What do you think it would do at Big Willow? Because you were out there at Big Willow, and the car wasn't right, and you weren't pushing hard. But once we dial it in, what do you think it can do at either of these tracks?
So real quick, like a 1:30 at Laguna is a very good time. I think you went a little quicker.
1:28.
I think we ran a 1:28. This car's
What's the fastest times at Laguna? Johnny probably knows top ahead.
The Zinger, whatever that thing's called.
That thing's crazy.
C21.
That had the record, right?
It did now, according to Kevin Zinger, who we're gonna have on the show, but it was a very early version of it. Did a 125.
And the Senna was 26?
127.9. It was, something like that.
So what do you think, Randy?
The Zinger is so much a racing prototype. On our car is a four-door luxury sedan that weighs almost 5,000 pounds.
Yeah, by the way, the Zinger makes way more power, everything. I mean, it's just, that thing's crazy.
Yeah.
$2 million car versus $130,000.
How close do you think we are to the Zinger right now?
It's amazing. Beating it's going to be hard. Sniffing on its heels. I think this car's got to be able to put 2 seconds on the other car at least.
So 126-ish?
This is a wild guess. But just looking at the components and having had a taste of the potential, there's so much potential. And we did do a lap time in our test, and the car was so new. There was just so much happening. And this podcast actually is what made that test happen. For me, anyway.
Yeah, no, it worked out perfectly.
So we get credit.
So thank you.
Sweet.
Again,
thank you.
I love it.
That and Hot Rod Garage yesterday. I was on an episode of their MotorTrend show,
Yep.
And so it was classic racing. There's no time. You've got to figure it out quick. You got to get it done. And I drove carefully, and it was really fast. Okay. So all I can say is there's tremendous potential.
Okay. And this is the same car with a different setup that you'll be taking to Pikes.
Yeah. So
and I also, if I may, I want to jump in here. Electric cars are perfectly suited to Pikes Peak hill climb, because one of their issues is at full throttle they use their power up real quickly. You cannot lap an electric car for an hour, and not a street-based one anyway. But at Pikes Peak, you're only running 10 minutes or less. Yep. And so that's ideal. And then electric power does not care about oxygen.
Right.
So our power we don't lose any power.
Right.
And it's at that altitude difficult to keep anything cool. But the gas engine cars have the exact same problem.
Oh, well, I was testing with Reese. I mean, they had to cut it short with that crazy GT3R he has because of cooling. And it was like, all right, what's the solution? Double the size of the intercooler and a fan that's twice as big. That'll fix it,
Right.
So,
right.
So we're really close to the end of the podcast, unfortunately, but I did want to leave. I have two questions, one each. Well, it's more of a statement for Randy. So let me go to Ben first. So, the entire podcast was Tesla. It's great. Tesla's a leader in the space, a pioneer. Are you going to do other vehicles? Are you going to is Unplugged going to branch out and
you going to pimp my Rivian?
Rivians, Lucids. I've asked this of others in the space, and they're like, well, it depends on volume. But what are you looking at? Or are you just like, nope, it's Tesla right now? And
yeah, I don't look at it from just the unit economics and the business standpoint of others. Perhaps I look at it because we're very loyal to Tesla. That's our origins. Okay. And right now we're very busy just growing our business for Tesla. There's no question that the things we do would apply equally well to a Lucid or to a Rivian or something else. And those cars are interesting. You know, as a car enthusiast, I can never say, oh, I only care about Tesla. Of course, I care about all this stuff. But as a business, and as our purpose right now for how we dedicate our lives and spend our time, there's a lot more to be done with Tesla. So until we finish that mission to a point where we feel we have capacity to do something else, it wouldn't be wise for us to even look at it.
Okay. So then let me just stick on that, because we talk about EVs being inevitable. You know, people are going to end up in one. For the EV enthusiast, brand agnostic, if they want to take their EV and go for a track day or some sporty driving, what is the first piece of advice you would give them? I'll go with Randy first.
Brakes, brake pads. The cars are powerful and they're heavy, and that adds up to brake temperature.
Okay. You didn't have to be so literal with actual, I was thinking audit your soul. What do you want to get out of this track?
Don't audit your soul.
Right.
I'm a race car driver.
Yeah. What would you say?
I mean, I've had people come out to our Tesla Corsa event in their 70s that drove, 15 hours in their Model X and had a really good time. I don't, when you talk about driving a car and having fun, one of the things, as this is a broader conversation, I don't think there's a correlation between fast and fun. I think that some of the most fun cars are slow and analog.
Sure.
And there's a lot of marketing involved, saying, oh, in order to have fun, it must be the fastest. I mean, those are two different things.
One of the most fun cars I've ever driven was a 1903 Mercedes Simplex that had one pedal for the right brakes and one pedal for the left brake. That was fun.
So you're, in a sense, you're saying just get out and do it.
What I'm saying is the answer is different for different people, but the number one thing is do it. Because if you don't do it, you don't have that experience. And you might learn that you want to go faster and become competitive, and that's cool. Or you might just learn that you enjoy your car more and you saw something different in the car or in your own driving style or in the experience that's memorable. There's different answers, but the only thing for certain is if you don't leave the house, you don't experience it.
And I want to add, I've won almost 100 pro races. I've driven every car on earth. And I'm asked over and over, what's it like to track an electric car? It's silent. It's strange. I need the noise to drive.
Yes.
Not for me. I want the power, and I want the power now, and I want a lot of it. And the electric cars deliver.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because every race car driver I know, when they race, they have earplugs in under their helmet. You can't hear anything.
We can do the podcast in the car at Pikes Peak if you wanted. We're just gonna add a couple
Let's
seats.
do that. In fact, let's do that.
Well, let's have a follow-up episode after Pikes.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that to end it all, please don't end it all for you both. Be very safe.
Don't use that terminology right before the Pikes Peak hill climb.
How many? I can't even tell the number of times. Don't go off the mountains. No kidding. Thank you for that.
Be very
no
safe.
idea.
Because we would love to talk to everyone back. Have everyone back.
Or you could get a better co-host. I mean, just think of it that way.
True.
It might be a big plus for you.
Not possible.
Thanks again. It's
Thank
great
you.
having you guys. And again, good luck.